Okay, everyone, we're ready to start. We're just waiting for 1 minute now. So I want to welcome everybody here this morning. Happy New Year to everybody. It's great to see you all. As always, I need to let you know that this meeting is being webcast or live or subsequent broadcast on the Council's meeting YouTube channel. And that members of the press and public, if there were any here, are able to record and take photographs except for where there are exempt items. We have received some apologies this morning from Councillor Simon Morrell and from Rabia Sharmi. Mariam Jan is expected. Councillor Jan, I think, is just running late this morning. Item 3 on the agenda are declarations of interest. So members are reminded they must declare all relevant pecuniary and other registrable interests arising from any business to be discussed at the meeting this morning. Are there any interests to declare? Thank you very much. Item 4 are our action notes, and these action notes won't be available until our adjourned meeting is reconvened and completed, and we're hoping to do that later this month, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. Item 4 are our action notes, so hopefully members will have had a chance to have a quick look at them. We need to note them, but are there any items on there that any members wish to raise? Councillor Hughes?
I'm having trouble getting the documents on. I think there's something on action notes about children out of school and children not in a suitable school and children on reduced timetables.
Yes, you're correct, and we have got that on the agenda for the February meeting.
So we'll have that data at the February meeting.
We will ensure that we do have that data before that meeting.
Yeah, I think it just seems like that should be readily available anyway.
It should be. I also wanted to note that in September we did ask for a structure chart for the directorate, and I know that there was some information shared with us after that, but we're still awaiting a more detailed structure chart. So I know that not all of the permanents are in place yet, but I wonder whether we could get a picture of what we have at the moment, which can then be updated.
How far down the hierarchy do you want it to go, Chair?
I just think as wide as possible, because I think members have shared with us that, and I know I find it difficult just to know who is doing what at the moment, because we're not involved on a day-to-day basis in terms of personnel, of course. It's just trying to put names out there and try and put them to different responsibilities, really. So just what you can provide to us would be really useful. And then if you have a look at that and see if there's anything missing that, or we want a deeper cover, that would be really useful.
That's no problem. And I can let you know who's permanent member of staff and who's temporary member of staff.
That would be helpful. That would be very helpful, Sue. Thank you. Anything else on the tracker that any members wish to raise?
Just
Councillor Birmingham?
on the home to school transport, we were going to have a timescale for the review of the policy. Has that come through?
I don't believe it has. Amanda, no. Sue, could you take that away for us as well, do you think?
Another review has started. I'll check when the end date is for that and send you a note, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we'll note the action tracker and move swiftly on to item 6. We're flying through it this morning. Brilliant. So item 6, we've got a progress update on the Children and Families Directorate Improvement Plan. For this item, we have in attendance Councillor Karen McCarthy, Cabinet Member for Children, Young People and Families, Sue Harrison, Strategic Director for Children and Families, and Kerry Madden, who is the programme manager. So I'll hand straight over to you, Sue, if you want to start us off there. Thank you.
Very much. So, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity actually to share just some of the detail on the progress that we're making with our Directorate Improvement Plan. Because I've said on a couple of occasions, haven't I, that you kind of need to see the overall plan to understand where, for example, the SEND improvement fits in, to understand where the Children's Travel Service fits in. So this session today is to provide you with an overview of the plan. And then, of course, we're really happy to bring updates regularly because we have an improvement board, which we'll tell you a bit about during the session. For that board, we provide highlight reports, as you'd expect, to demonstrate our progress. But, you know, we're happy to come here any time. But you've seen the first slide, thank you, Amanda. You've seen the first slide before, that our vision is that all children thrive in Birmingham. And I don't want to dwell on this slide because you have seen it before, but on the other hand, I think it's really important to remember that what we're doing is absolutely driven by wanting the best outcomes for children and their families in Birmingham. And we can't ever forget that. So in order for children to thrive, we know that they have to feel safe, they have to feel healthy and confident and included if they're going to achieve to the most of their potential in their early years setting or their school or college or employment situation. We know that we want to identify and support children and families at the earliest point of need. That's a key principle. We don't want to wait for children to, you know, end up with their situation deteriorating to hit our thresholds. We want to go to where children and young people are and wrap our services around them instead of expecting them to come. And importantly, we focus on what children and families can do as much as what they can't do, because we want to have that strength-based and relationship-based practice so that we're doing with and not to. So that forms the basis of our improvement plan. And of course, putting children at the heart of Birmingham and showing our organisational love for our children is really important. And the council kind of made a big gesture to that just by changing the name of my role. Because remember when I came, it was Director of Education and Skills. Now to be Director of Children and Family Services is giving that clear indication, isn't it, that we're putting children at the heart of things. So we've spent quite a long time developing our children's plan because we're building something special to last. And the plan is based on evidence. It's based on a big piece of baselining work that we did across all our teams. It's not just something, you know, I came in and thought, well, these things need to change. We looked at what was happening. We looked at the great practice. We looked at what we weren't happy with. And actually, the staff were telling me what they weren't happy with and what they knew needed to change in order to deliver better outcomes for children. So we know that, you know, you've got to collaborate. Even if you didn't want to, naturally you kind of have to, because you can't make the level of improvement that we need to make on your own as a single team or as a single director, actually. And our improvement board, it has representatives across the whole of the council, because we're relying on things like IT, on things like data services, on things like HR, none of which sit in my directorate, particularly that they're corporate support services. And we know, because we've learned, I've learned from my own professional experience, but we know from the research as well, that successful improvement plans for children and families are where the whole council and the system comes together. So our health partners, obviously our school leaders are really key in this improvement piece, as are the police as well. So all the key partners in the Children's Partnership are supporting us with our improvement journey. And we know that we need to work strategically as well as practically. So we need to have one eye on what is the lived experiences of our children and young people. And let's not forget that when we develop our strategy. Because if we don't have a strategic plan, we will never change things for our children and young people. But if we have a strategic plan which is high and lofty and an ivory tower plan and doesn't actually take into account where our children and young people are now, then it won't work either. So you have to have that balance between real evidence of knowing what's going on. And of course, doing this together means talking to our children and young people and listening to what they say, even if it doesn't fit with what the professional view might be. really got to hear that challenge from children and families. And we've got to make sure that we hold all this together and keep children at the heart of this piece of work, while as a whole council, we're wrapping around and not expecting to continually improve. You know, all my members of staff should be expecting regular feedback as to how they're doing, not to be critical of them, but to be able to say, this is what's going really well, but this is what needs to improve for our children and young people. And what are your ideas on how we can do that better? And if you think you've ever got it sorted in my role, you've got another thing coming, because you never have. Life is continual learning, continual improvement, because we always want to make things better for children and young people. So it's embedding that culture of continual improvement, of continual audit work, of continual looking at data and seeing where we're doing. So we have oversight from a cross-council improvement board, and that improvement board is chaired by an experienced and well-regarded DCS from Walsall Council. And again, that was a strategic decision to have somebody who is well experienced in improvement to give me support and challenge as DCS. Because if I chaired that board myself, then I'd be kind of marking my own homework, which I don't think is a good idea. And we do all need that continual support and challenge, don't we? And that's partly what this committee gives, I know, but it's also helpful to have it from a DCS perspective. So when we thought about this piece of work, it wasn't just, well, let's write a plan and deliver some changes. It was around continual improvement with our health, social care, obviously in Birmingham Children's Trust, they're working closely with us as well as our health partners and our school partners. And what support do we need from the council to make this work? And we've had incredible support actually across the board, whether it's been from corporate colleagues or whether it's been from school leaders wanting to be more inclusive and work with me on how we can have better inclusive practice, for example. So a plan is giving us that kind of North Star where we can say to people, these are the priorities. And some of the bits of the plan, which Kerry will go on to talk about in a bit more detail, are also interdependent. So there's an order for doing these things, because if we don't get the data right, then our data analysis will be off. So we won't be able to have KPIs that inform progress, for example. If I'm saying that I need to recruit a whole permanent team of SENAR workers, clearly there's going to be some stresses and strains on the HR team that are helping me do that work. So it's all got to become planned strategically and appropriately. So in terms of where we are now in our strategic context, I think I've mentioned this before, but the LGA, the Local Government Association, they have a really helpful research that they've published into the phases of improvement. And the LGA has 3 phases: poor to fair, fair to good, and good to great. And then they helpfully have those defining characteristics. And this is built on across the country, children's services across the country over the last, I think, about 6 or 7 years. So where we are now actually is in the first box. So we're getting the basics right, absolutely driven by leadership, but we know that we've got to put firm foundations in place if we're going to have a strong building. And that's really important, that we're spending some time to get our basics right and building that ethos and culture of continual self-improvement and continual learning. Everyone a learner, everyone a leader, and engaging the workforce. And we're looking in the next 6 months to move from poor to fair to fair to good. And I'll keep bringing this slide back to talk to you about as we move through our development plan, so you can have your views of where you think we are. And obviously, at the end, and I've been quite clear. I think this is a 3-year journey to good, 5 years to consolidate good and move beyond good, but a 3-year good to great. And we've had 1 year, haven't we? So 2 years left. And some of the yards that we've made in this last 12 months, they have been hard yards, but they've been absolutely in order to put those firmer foundations in place. So I'll hand over now to Kerry, who's our improvement lead. Again, very experienced, working with several councils in her professional experience to improve the whole of children's services and have that holistic approach. So really pleased, Kerry's been with us for a good 6 months now, haven't you, Kerry? And it's been brilliant that she's been able to give us her expertise and capacity. So I'd like Kerry to describe to you how we developed the improvement plan and take us through it, and then we'll take questions at the end. Is that okay, Chair?
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. That's very much so. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you this morning. So really excited to talk to you about the work that's been happening over the last few months and where we're up to, because we're all making progress in this sector now. So to just touch on how we built the plan, what's contained within the plan, we've already talked about baseline. So first of all, the first step is understanding where we were with the services, and all the services are largely on the list directed in terms of the functions that the service providers will work in. So it's really important to have those conversations with teams and to understand that how those activities will put again team up with things to go well with the things that the teams in the staff felt that they wanted to improve. So baseline exercises are really thorough and important piece of work that has informed everything that we've done. We're also very aware of the current plans that were in train, so the corporate plan and the directorate delivery plan, and also there were existing plans that were in place, and we wanted to make sure that we brought those things into as well. So there was one single overarching strategic plan of the improvements. We considered and also incorporated into all the work that we're going to talk about today, a huge piece of work, the Learning and Children's Partnership. So that's the council alongside colleagues in health and the social care and so on, wider partnership for children in Birmingham. Was to put a really huge exercise to engage young people in 2021. Just under 4,000 children and people able to provide their views, and we considered that feedback was all the work that we'll talk to today. As Sue said, we considered improving best practice. So there are many of the authorities that have gone through the experiences that we're here, and it's learning from this and then adding kind of like Birmingham approach to that, and we will build on that even more. So great opportunity to look at what's worked in other areas, what works, and then learning at how that can, how we can learn from that and we can build on that and answer that in Birmingham. So looking at improving best practice. Audit and assurance. So we've also been considering those things the plan where we audit has taken place, and there's learning from audit in terms of how we could make services even better. So we considered that, and that's been built in. And then, of course, the two extremely important pieces of work that have been completed on learning with regards to everyone's life and everyone's business and breaking down barriers. And those two key pieces of work have also been important work being done. And then finally, the last extremely important element of all this is about making sure that the improvements are in line with statutory guidance. So looking at different kinds of practice, for example, there's one that working together to safeguard children. So across the whole range of services that are provided by the Children and Families Directorate, there's a whole range of statutory policy and guidance that sits alongside that. And what we want to do is make sure that our services are working within that statutory context as well. So making sure we've got a great opportunity to just so that's the things that are informed the plan. Just move on to the next slide. Thank you. And then, as Sue said, building solid foundations are critical. So to all of the work within the plan is getting these through really key. So that's about getting the structure for the future. So really making sure we've got that structure, the future children's services structure right. So working to develop what does that need to look like in Birmingham to make sure that we're able to meet the needs of our children and people. And we're making the best opportunities of how we can work together as a system to do that. So that's really key, getting that right. And then the second thing, which is absolutely linked to that, so this builds on Sue's point about interdependencies, is about, so once we've kind of got that structure and that vision around that structure, it's then about working to build stable permanency. So a team that is representative of Birmingham, that is stable, people that work in Birmingham and stay in Birmingham and understand the families and children and the community in Birmingham. So really work and that's supporting that stability. And the really important is that, our vision around want to be, we really want that services, we want that services to be very, very best in Birmingham, and that's what we're working towards. And to do that, we need to make sure that our colleagues and team members are supported to develop and grow, so that they're nurtured and they have those opportunities to develop. So that's a really key to workforce efficiency and stability and people wanting to stay and really grow and develop their careers in Birmingham. And then the third, key one, and I know Sue has talked about this many times, and our colleagues across the council are playing a huge role in this, is around making staff have the right, ensuring staff have the right tools to do the job, and they have the right things there to do that. So that's around our IT, our digital, really optimising the use of digital systems and making things as streamlined as possible and supporting the colleagues with that. But really key to that is if we've got the right systems, we've got the right digital and the right IT in place, that enables us to have the information to understand our services, and that's around the data that we can then maximise for our systems.
So those three things are really key and absolutely require that whole council support approach.
Excuse me. And then bringing the improvement plans together in one place. So as Sue talked about, the great opportunity, and we know that successful improvement journeys are those where we pull everything together and we have that one overarching view and we can plan then the whole piece together. So what we tend to do is kind of bring that overview to Sue said the North Star of the plan. So there are a number of sections within the plan, 5 of them just there. So the first section is around developing the Children and Families Directorate to deliver best-in-class services. And that section in the plan focuses on all of those things that kind of underpin a good, sort of getting that system really steady and straight. So the HR stuff, the digital, the data, that whole piece of ambition. So that's all the enabling work streams that sit within that work stream there. So that's the first one. The second really critical one, which there's lots of exciting work in this place, which is about wrapping services around our most vulnerable children and people. So how we can work together as a council with our partners and our colleagues, and actually the great opportunities we have with the services within the Children and Families Directorate on our relationships with our partners, how we can really look at how we develop those services to the very best that we want them to be, but also how those colleagues and teams can work together so that they're wrapping around and supporting those children and families. So some really exciting and interesting work that will be taking place on that work stream. As I say, some of it is already progressing. The third one, colleagues will be familiar with, because I know that there's been lots of updates with regards to this over the last couple of years, but around the transformation and improvement of services for children with SEND, and that work's already well underway. And the fourth one is around the work to transform and improve the children and youth travel service. Again, that work is already well developed, and that's just about having that whole oversight of the programme. And then the final work stream is around the children's services in sustainable, compliant delivery and designed to deliver best outcomes. So that's around some of the transformation work that's taking place in the directorate. So those are the 5 key work streams. As a whole, there are 34 projects. So there are 34 chunky pieces of work that within there, 297 actions. So a lot of sort of focused work taking place with action leaders and project leads all working really hard. So here's what I'm looking to do that work and supported by colleagues. So a real team effort in doing this, both the directorates and the council, and then of course colleagues from the partnership, but also our working in terms of our learning from other areas. So that's just a flavour of the plan of the context of the plan. If we just move on to the next slide, please, Marjorie. Thanks very much. So the next slide, and hopefully the committee will be able to see this slide in the pack, so I won't list it because it can distance where but we wanted
to describe to you the first of all where we want to be, so our improvement plan. So just in terms of what it looks like, what the plan is. So in terms of where we want to be, so that clear strategic vision, policy and strategy that aligns with statutory duties and funding with that wider shift partner approach, which we've talked about. The right structure, the right level of resources to support that. Permanent team, and people in place, improved use of digital and IT that enables us to have robust performance monitoring, and that's useful at all sorts of levels, both at an operational, so our managers, our team managers, our staff managers have access to that information, but also that's available strategically as well, and it enables senior leaders to have a line of sight to services. So that's a whole important piece of work. Good quality learning and development opportunities that enable staff to grow and develop. High quality practice and standards across all of our work. So colleagues are really clear on what are the standards, what are the policies, the practice standards about how we deliver our work across the different areas.
So all of that in place, working together, and in that sense, that's as Sue talked about how we want to live with our partners around how it's with. It's absolutely, we can the conditions in Birmingham when it's about everybody working together and everybody celebrating success and teams working together to celebrate success, but also to work together to solve problems so that we can all come together to get to where we want to be for our children and people. So that's absolutely that we want to be with the directorate. And we know that children and families directorates that are in those conditions, they absolutely are the conditions that we need to achieve, so the good and outstanding that we want to achieve. Thanks, Kerry. We can move on to the next slide, what we're going to do to get there. I'd just like to stress that.
Of course, we've got some teams that have got permanent staff, but we've got others that are 95% agency. So there's real inconsistency across the teams. And what we've got to do is make sure that we bring everybody up to the same level. So some of our teams are very good at knowing how well they're doing because they report data up to the DFE on a regular basis. But other teams haven't got any KPIs at all. So they don't know how they're doing, actually. They know the process is being followed. But can I ask the question, what impact are you having on children and young people? That's a question that they're not used to answering. So there's great inconsistency in where different teams are. And the beauty of the baseline is we've been able to have those conversations with teams to say, well, how do you think, we could show that impact? And it's not okay, is it, not to know what impact you're making as a team in the council? You need to know what positive difference you're making. So we're putting things into place. And for some teams, that's a big change. For other teams, it's not. But it kind of isn't a one size fits all. We're saying that everybody has to come to this level so that we know what the practice is and we know what the quality of that practice is, whether that's a measurable, quantifiable outcome or whether it's looking at some casework in a DIP sample with an audit. So we're very clear as a team that we understand what good looks like, what does good look like, and we're having those conversations. And obviously, because there's not been stability of leadership for some time in children's services, it is some time since those conversations have been had. We've had churn of staff. So it's a great chance, I think, to bring everybody together and recognise that where we want to be, that's not exceptional, it's where we should be. This is the services that children and families should expect from every team in my directorate. Are we there now? No, we're not. And I think it's just important to recognise that everyone's on a bit of a different stage in the journey, but committed to working together to get there. So you're just going to give us a few pointers out, Kerry, some highlights about the key focuses for this year, really.
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of the whole range of things that on the slide, what are we going to do to get there? So that's essentially a summary of some of the headlines within the plan, and then the progress so far. Thank you, Amanda. So if we could just go back to the what we're going to do to get there slide. Thank you. Lovely, thank you very much. So we talked about professional development and getting that into place, learning and cultural quality assurance, as Sue has just talked about. That's a key element of what we'll be looking to do, making sure that we've got those really robust operating governance arrangements, and that's the policies and so on, that staff have a lot of continued opportunities to contribute to improvement and so on. So and communication.
So that's a whole range of things, and also around our work now departments. As Sue said, absolutely free, and Colin will talk to us a bit about that shortly. So all of us to say already progress being made around these. So if we could just move on to the next slide, progress so far. Thank you. So then this is just a headline of some of the things that are being done, and it's right here because what we wanted to the plan, the Improving Services for Children and Families plan, captures all of the work for the improvement journey. And of course, we're well on the way to the improvement journey, and we started that work at the beginning of 2022. So what this slide does is captures for you an update on all the things that have already taken place. So as you'll be aware, the high level vision, that was something that was we're also going to be able to do and share this, share that again today. The baseline was completed in May and June last year. The high level target operating model was taken to Cabinet in June 2022 as well. Long-term resource requirements have been identified and will be addressed as part of the attention and focus that they'll be addressed as part of the NTFP process in February. Senior leadership appointments have already been made, so we're suitable to have the permanent recruitment that's taken place. So we now have an increasingly permanent senior leadership team, and there are 2 more recruitments taking place on this
In January, we'll be able to for the AD for lifelong learning and the AD for thriving families. A lot of good interest in those roles.
Thanks, Sue. And then a performance management frameworks, we talked about the work that we're doing around performance, and I'm absolutely keen on thanking that is we launched a performance management framework and a whole range of work around that in September and October. That will evolve and develop as we do the development side, but we're absolutely making a good start with that work, and that will evolve and grow over the coming months. Our staff reference group, so that's been on the since March. Pulse survey for staff, so regular updates, pulse opportunities for staff to engage. Pulse survey was undertaken last year, and that became into the baseline in the plan, and so on. And then, of course, we've got the work around Learning Insurance Partnership, so that was well underway. I know Colin will talk to you a little bit about that. Engagement with head teachers, we have a reference group there. And a really exciting update, which is very recent, is that we have several network that is now up and running, and that's comprised of colleagues from across the council, and the cabinet approved the corporate safeguarding policy in December. So that's been a really important that has been undertaken. So I think it's the last slide.
Yeah, I guess I've already said this actually, that's the committee or something. You've got the overview of the plan. Happy to take any questions now. Happy to bring back any deep dives you want into any particular areas of the plan. And you know, I think it is helpful to bring back, I'm proposing quarterly, but again, it's up to the committee, regular updates so you can see how we're doing against our improvement plan.
Thanks very much, Sue. I'll just bring in Councillor McCarthy.
I just wanted to add very quickly that my emphasis has been on steady, solid, unbreakable progress. So the timescale that Sue has talked about does sound slow, but it's about being steady and embedding that progress so that it's there for our children, regardless of what else is going on. And that's made up of factors like solid, reliable data, the work that's going on about quality, and we see that particularly in SEND. It's not just about hitting the targets on timing, it's about the quality of the work that is going on, and that is looked at and improvement takes place. And it's about honest feedback and honest conversations right across the board with partners, with staff, with parents, and most of all with children and young people themselves. And that's all I wanted to say for now.
Thank you very much. For me, and I think I'll probably echo some frustration in that we have another improvement plan, and we've had many in this room, well, not just this room, but on this committee. We've received a lot of improvement plans over the years. So we've got another iteration of an improvement plan. But what makes this different from those that have been put in place previously? What is different about this one that is going to make it work? Because it's important that it does, clearly. And what assurances, what more assurances can we be given about that particular aspect? Because we can't just keep having new plans. So we've got a plan, you know, if we have a plan for 3 years, we can't just then have a new plan at the end of the 3 years because the previous plan hasn't worked. So, and I know that that's a frustration that other members of this committee that have been here probably longer than me have. So that's just a question from me. And also just on the children's partnership. So really, how is this a new thing? Has it been around before? If it's been around before, why? What has happened to it to make it perhaps not work as well as it should be? And how will we sustain it now to make sure that it is effective and it does provide that real partnership approach? So 2 quick questions from me, and then I'll take Councillor John and Councillor Hughes and anybody else that indicates.
Thanks, Chair. And your first question, I think, is a fair challenge and one that I hear in many different audiences. It's difficult for me to comment on previous improvement plans when I wasn't leading those improvement plans. But this isn't the first DCS role I've come into where there's been previous improvement plans that for whatever reason haven't been delivered. That's why with this plan, all I can say is that I've put all my professional experience into it in terms of conditions for success. So this is why I know we can't do it on our own. We need political support as well as support from partners. This is why I know we can't do it with 95% agency staff, because you can't get policy practice with 95% agency staff. Some of the things we've done, such as the medium-term financial plan, to have a substantive budget which is big enough to enable those teams to be substantive, that is a significant change, I would suggest. And that says, well, we're building these foundations. We did have a very robust, quite operational, but also strategic plan for the children's travel service. I did say that would improve, and it did. Since I've been the DCS, I don't think I've said anything's going to improve and then we've missed a deadline and it's not improved. So I think it's really important that what I say we're going to do, we do. A lot of thought's gone into this plan and the timescales for this plan, so that I'm not in a position of saying to you, well, we thought this would happen, but then there was a delay. So I guess what I've done is surrounding myself with people that have done this before. And we've been unashamedly elitist in our recruitment, actually. And I've said I want existing people to do sideways moves to Birmingham. This is not a job to learn on, because our improvement plan is so important and it needs to be delivered in a timely fashion. And I think I'm going to have to earn the credibility, aren't I, from this committee and other audiences. That's why I want to bring quarterly updates. So we've set our targets for each quarter. Some of the targets don't kick in for a year with some of the actions, but there's enough actions to be monitored on appropriately. And where things don't go to plan, I will have to explain to this committee why things haven't got to plan. But I think it's important that you're cited on the key milestones, and there'll be some that you're more interested in than others, and that's fine. I've had exactly the same conversations from head teachers around, you know, I'm a sixth DCS in 5 years or something. There's been a lot of churn. And what I'm saying is this is a commitment to a sustained change programme for Birmingham, because the children deserve that. I'm making a commitment as a permanent member of staff, and so are my team joining me as permanent members of staff. And we will do this together, and we'll bring you with us on the journey. And that's the reassurance that I can give you, that I will be here reporting what has happened. In terms of the partnership, I think partners in Birmingham have always wanted to engage around children and wrap around children. And the partnership was in existence, but due to the churn of DCSs, there hasn't been engagement with the council. So they've done some great work, the partnership, on bringing a children's plan nearly to fruition, but then it had kind of fallen apart because the project team had disappeared, nobody had funded them, and the work had just stalled. And when I got the job and said to partners, do you know what, we should reinvigorate the partnership, and Colin can talk about this in the next item as well, they were so enthusiastic about joining round, and I'm so positive about our children's plan and 2023 change for children and the stuff that Colin's going to talk to you about, because that again is helping our improvement journey in the council become sustainable, because children are everybody's business. I feel so privileged to be a DCS because my whole job is focused around children. The police's job has got many other focuses. Health people's job has got many other focuses. There's only really the DCS in schools and early years who really focus just on children. And so it's always about how do we champion, with lots of competing priorities, children's place in this city and put them at the centre of things. And Colin will expand a bit on that. So I think my role as a system leader, the DCS's role as a system leader, is really important. And that was one thing I made, really clear, I suppose, when I said I wanted to come to Birmingham. It was to be part of a system, because I know that just on its own, the council can't do it. But I think the experience at Birmingham has shown that when you have such a churn of senior leaders, it's really difficult to sustain relationships with partners. So it's not rocket science. Consistency is important. And we'll bring updates from the partnership. But there's not been pushing at open doors. There's been no doors there, actually. People have just said, we need a children's plan, and it'll be a strong children's plan as a result of kind of that invigoration. So I think it's a good collaborative partnership.
Thanks, Sue.
Okay.
Councillor Jones. Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. 3 small questions.
Okay, I was just wondering, can us as elected members join a head teachers forum? If yes, how? If not, why not? The second question is, why are we relying so much on agency staff? Because obviously the kids need someone, kids get attached, we know that. And then agency staff come and go, and it's costing a little bit more than what it would normally do. Are we struggling to get the right staff in? Is that why we're relying on an agency? And then my last and final question is, schools, are they promoting youth projects or any outside school services where their young people can attend as well, to help them basically move forward with themselves in their personality, in building relationships, in enhancing their skills? Are schools doing that, and are the schools aware of what services are around for their young people to have additional services and opportunities for them to take advantage of, like youth clubs and so forth? Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. I'll just deal with them in the order that you presented. And the first one is a really interesting question about engagement with head teacher fora. And all I can do there is I'll go away and talk to the chairs of the head teacher fora, because to be frank, it isn't really for me to say why elected, what that relationship should look like. But I think the more we talk in partnership in our different roles and understand the challenges schools are facing, the opportunities that schools have got, then that can't be a bad thing. Whether we need a separate forum for that, though, because obviously head teachers have got their own business, which sometimes is not appropriate for council officers to be out, they're doing their own thing. It's interesting that you make that comment, because we're having conversations about the role of school improvement within this council, because, as you know, school improvement is a statutory duty of the council, and we've got a good commission with Birmingham Education Partnership. But I'm asking that question, have I got enough people to speak to schools within my directorate? So most of our schools are brilliant. They play the game, they keep to the rules. But what if a school doesn't? What if they've hit a bad patch? We commission other people to do that work, but where's the role of the council in that? So we're still looking at our forever structure, which I want to sign off in February. And I'm really thinking in that structure about having some key people within that structure whose role it is to report up to me around what's the temperature with the schools, and if a school does need some support and help, who is the person to phone them up. At the minute, they do get phoned up by different people, but they're in different places in the organisation. I don't think it's as clear as it needs to be. So part of our engagement with schools in the new regime, I suppose, the new world moving forward, where schools are rightly independent, but our maintained schools are our statutory responsibility. And we want to, like we do with our families, work with and empower schools and not do two schools. And schools are so valuable, aren't they? Because they see our children every day and they nurture our children and enable them to thrive. But I think there's more conversations to have. And as part of those conversations, I think the role of elected members is really critical. Schools are working well in localities. They have their own localities of consortia, and they also work with the Children's Trust localities in terms of the early help. In terms of the last question, are they promoting all the activities? I would say it's a mixed picture. I would say that I don't actually know how well all our 444 schools and settings are able to promote. I do know since we've improved our local offer for SEND, schools have found that really, really valuable because they're able to go somewhere to have a directory to enable parents to know what youth clubs are particularly inclusive and what activities in the holidays, for example, our children with SEND can access. But I think we've still got some work to do on a central directory of in your locality. These are all the things going on for 10 to 12-year-olds, all the things going on for post-16. And there's lots of activities, there's lots of social capital, isn't there, in our different localities in Birmingham. So I think we've got some way to go. I think schools do their best, but to have an up-to-date directory for them, an online one, is probably something we need to work towards in order that they've got something to tap into. I'm sure if they're aware of an opportunity, we'll promote it. But I guess as every leader, you don't know what you don't know, do you? So there is some more work to do on that one. The agency one's probably the most straightforward one to answer. And the reason we're reliant on agency is historically, we didn't have enough staff to do the work that needs doing. So we know, don't we, that part of Senel's inability to cope with the rising demand was the fact that they had 800 cases to work. And nobody, no matter how good you are, can work with 800 children at one time. It's impossible. So in order to make those caseloads manageable, we had to take on a lot of extra staff. Until I've got a substantive budget to appoint those staff permanently, they have to be agency. And that's my big frustration, I'll be honest with you, because some of those staff are really good and want to be permanent. And as soon as I've got a structure with a substantive budget stream, which I'm hopeful that the cabinet paper in February will, agree to, then there won't be a problem. It might take 6 months to a year to go from 95% to, a 10% churn, which you would expect. And so it's a bit different to the normal story of, churn means a lot of staff come and go. Some staff do come and go because actually we're ratcheting up our standards as well. And if a member of staff comes and they can't have the quality of work that we want, if they're agency, they don't stay. They'll either choose to leave or we will ask them to leave because we've been unashamedly elitist with the quality of staff. But we've got a good cohort of quite stable agency staff actually who we're wanting to transfer over to permanent as soon as I'm able. But obviously I can't do that until I've got substantive budget. And that's the same position for the children's travel service. Again, the budget hadn't been right sized for a long time, and so it's not adequate for the number of roles that we need, because that is another area where there are many more children now entitled to transport, and obviously we need to deliver that offer, and we'd want to deliver a great offer there. And the other part of the directorate, which is mainly agency, is commissioning, because again, we didn't think enough in the past about the substantive commission structure. Bearing in mind, we commission, millions and millions of pounds worth of contract. And just this year, we've got 37 million 0 to 19 health child contract. I've got some really talented agency staff who I'm recruiting in order for them to become permanent when we're able. So I wouldn't like to paint a picture that we've got chaotic churn. We've got 3 key areas of mainly agency staff, and that's just because we don't yet have the substantive budget. But once we've got that budget agreed, I'll be able to report massive reductions on those percentages of agency staff. You're welcome.
Thanks, Sue. On the sort of local offer, I mean, it would be really great if we could get some sort of directory of local offer for all of our children and young people that we know. I mean, clearly it's going to change continually. But that would be really useful in that it would help identify those gaps as well where they exist, because we know that we've got areas across the city where we have got gaps in services. So I'm sure that will fit in somewhere with the work that you're all doing, but I'm grateful to Councillor Jan for raising that. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I'm sure I'm going to sound very light now, but I'm disappointed with this as a plan. I don't think it has anything of any substance. I'm looking, for instance, I don't know, page 3 where it says about Birmingham Children's Drive. They are supported by a Children's Services Director who has a strong governance and management, engaged staff, clear strategy. Now, to me, that is a statement of the blindingly obvious. That is exactly what it should be. It goes on to talk about delivered through our principles, identifying and supporting early aiming to get it right the first time. I have no idea what that means. If we have a look at this plan in 6 months' time or 12 months' time, how do I measure whether or not we've done that? There's no way of doing that. Professionals and services that wrap around our children and families, they just a little bit wrapped around now. Are they going to be more wrapped around in 3 months and a bit more wrapped around? I genuinely have no idea what it means. We've then got 1, 2, 3 pages just with pictures on, basically. Something about holding all of this together as a whole council team as we work to embed the culture of continuous improvement. Again, I mean, to me, that just isn't measurable in any meaningful way. What else have we got? Page 11. Ensure services are sustainable, compliant and designed to deliver the best outcome for children, young people and families. Again, this is what I expect as just a basic standard. And yet, just coming back to Councillor Jane's point, we're talking about, what did you refer to it as? Right size budget for transport. The council will very shortly be presenting its budget at the council. And I can't help getting the impression that some people might have different versions of what right size means there. Go on to that one. Progress so far. We have a staff reference group launched. I have no idea what the benefit of that is or what the outcome of it is. Staff put survey undertaken. I mean, again, the same. I don't see anything there that to me qualifies as a measure of progress. I'll leave it at that, except to say, Chair, that one of the reasons that I do find this plan so disappointing is that earlier this week I was having a look again at the Youth Justice Plan that we've recently looked at. And the Youth Justice Plan, to me, only my opinion obviously, if you want background, it's in the Youth Justice Plan. If you want context, it's in the Youth Justice Plan. If you want aspirations, projected timelines, outcomes, potential funding streams, names attached to particular things, all of that is in the Youth Justice Plan. And so for instance, I'm presuming we'll review the Youth Justice Plan again. We will be able to say, you said we're going to do X, Y, and Z. This is where we are at X, Y, and Z. What's happening? If we review this plan in 6 months, what are we going to be told? People are thriving. I'm genuinely, like I say, I'm disappointed, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Councillor McCarthy, you're going to offer some assurance of substance to Councillor Hughes?
Absolutely. I mean, it is a presentation of the plan, not the plan itself. And I'm very much with Sue in starting every presentation with that vision of Birmingham children thriving and the ways in which we see that happening. Because you've got to be able to relate it to children's experience. But as you work through the presentation, by the time you've got to page 11, we've got the 5 work streams, 34 projects and 287 actions. And if you actually want the full detail of that, I'm very happy. I mean, there may be some areas that you get less detail on than others, particularly because what nests underneath this are the different work streams. But if you want that detail, it clearly exists. And I can't see that Sue could argue that you couldn't have it or would want to.
Chair, if I may, I'm just going back to my earlier points. I believe it's 4 months now since I asked for details about, for instance, just the number of children out of school. Now, we still don't know that information 4 months later. By the time we get it, I don't know what period of relates to or how application it is. But if we don't have this information, we simply cannot judge progress. That's the point I'm making, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Hughes. I mean, just on the, going back to what Councillor McCarthy said, clearly, if we agree to receiving quarterly updates, then those updates will be providing us with the reports on progress and KPIs and everything else. I do get your point around asking for information and then we end up waiting a very long time for that information, and by the time we get it, sometimes it can then be for a period that doesn't then include the time that we've been waiting for it. So I can understand that. Just on your point, Councillor McCarthy, you know, for some of us, the more information, the better, I think. So if more information can be circulated to us that we can have a look at, which will help us to do our scrutiny function, then clearly, you know, we would want that.
I think two of our non-councillor colleagues have indicated.
They have. I'm going to call them in now, though. So
Sorry, Chair. That's presumption.
Justine.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to know a little bit more about the head teacher reference group. It's really positive that it's been established, and you say that it's been embedded. Two questions. Could you give us an example of an element of impact from that group? And also, is there a representation on that group from church schools?
I'll hand over the detailed representation church school to Kerry, because Kerry's helped me pull together that group. I'm sure there is, but I just couldn't name the head teacher off the top of my head. But in terms of influence, already that group have been so helpful, for example, with pulling together the inclusion work over the summer, because we wanted to start our inclusion strategy and support schools with what the barriers are currently to inclusion and how we will overcome those through our strategy. So the head teacher reference group was really helpful in pulling together some ideas as to how would we engage with head teachers. They suggested half-day sessions face-to-face. They said, you know, head teachers want to physically get together. They suggested we do it in July before the schools break up, but before it gets too hectic. So incredibly helpful to have advice on the timing, on the format. Those head teachers advised, and some of them brought good practice themselves, didn't they, Kerry? Yeah. To those workshops. And I can't tell you how much easier that made my role as DCS, because to be led by head teachers for head teachers is obviously much better than, you know, a DCS that they don't know coming along and saying, well, how can we work better at inclusion? So that's just one example. Basically, it's a kind of a two-way street. So we'll put some items on the agenda, won't we, Kerry? For example, how we're coming along with our inclusion strategy, or school places, you know, who's kind of worried about that. And head teachers will bring items to me. So we've talked about the developing learning programme, for example, and I've asked them why they think some schools are really engaged and other schools aren't, and what the barriers are to that. So it's a really invaluable group, because it's not a public group, public papers, it's not so formal, it's more, let's get round the table. We've got nursery schools, maintained primary schools, academy schools on that group. So it's incredibly helpful, and it's kind of not fixed membership either. So somebody could come along because we're talking about a particular interest of theirs, and then drop off as well. And we're more virtual than physical, but we're moving to more physical meetings, aren't we, at the request of that group. So obviously this action plan is key, because I don't want to burden head teachers. They've all got their own improvement plans with their own schools, but to have them cited on the action plan, I think, is really critical. So they can tell me, well, hang on, Sue, that's actually never going to happen in a year, because there's just too much to do there. So it's a sense check around my improvement plan, also the inclusion strategy and the SEND strategy as well. And again, as I said, with the other partners, head teachers have been so supportive and really want to help their children thrive in Birmingham. And they know that engaging with the council and influencing that work as it evolves is really important.
And I think what you said earlier about not doing things to them, but doing things together, I think head teachers will respond positively to that.
Well, we're all a collaborative bunch, aren't we? And actually, sounds a bit corny, but it's really true. We want the best things for children, and our whole purpose is absolutely to do the best things for children. We might not always agree on how what the best reach of that is, and then it's really important to understand why I'm thinking children and the head's done, or the other way around. And there's so much capacity in our system that probably we're not using because we're not listening carefully enough to our head teachers and helping empower them to be more inclusive, for example, by having more dedicated resource in localities. So we're just having some brilliant, exciting conversations, aren't we, Kelly?
Absolutely, and it's a group that's open to. So we opened it to anybody who would want to join. I was looking for the list. I can't find the list right at this moment, but we'll get back to you with that in terms of the composition. It is a small group. It's it's a small group, but it's we've got colleagues who are welcome to join them. So there are colleagues that you would might be interested. You're very welcome.
How often do you meet?
I think it's once a term.
Right.
Yeah, so it's termly. So yeah. So
I mean, I'm happy if you want to share those details with me of when the meetings are.
Yes.
I can promote that with the Catholic heads.
lovely.
That will be
Brilliant.
lovely.
That's
Yeah.
great. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
we'll do that. It's a good mix as well. We've got a couple of quite new head teachers to Birmingham and some really experienced Birmingham head teachers. So again, it's really helpful to have that because we've got our formal school forum meetings.
Yeah.
But they are formal and the agendas are often set outside our control really because with the school forum we've got the budget stuff that obviously we need to sort out. So it's just having that extra flexibility. So what we could also send you is a bit of a brief, couldn't we, Kerry, that we sent round to head teachers when we said who wants to join in. Obviously we can't make it massive or you can't have the discussions, but there's about 20 people, isn't there, on the membership?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah. So if you could promote that, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and if that information will be circulated, that'd be great. I've got two more that are still waiting, Councillor Jan. I'm not going to bring you back in yet because we've got to be mindful. Councillor Nancy, you're next.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. You've mentioned substantive budget, and I'm glad because I've only really got one question around that. In the presentation, you mentioned long-term resource requirements for the medium-term financial plan. And I was I'm not a finance expert, so I was thinking, well, long-term, medium-term. So I didn't quite see how that was going to mash up. One of the things we notice as councillors, elected members, often when we want things doing in our respective wards, that's one directorate, other directorate might be included because you've talked about collaborative working. One directorate tends to say, we can't do that because even though it's our directorate, that bit doesn't come under our budget. So without confusing you, I suppose what my question is about, because you've talked about long-term resource requirements and you want that budget allowed for in Feb, you've got an awful lot of services sitting under you, Sue, that they'll have their respective budgets. Things we've heard in the past about budgets is, that's not my budget, that's down to there, or they don't want to do it because they don't want their budgets affected in that. And I think as a committee, we often struggle with having any finance associated with plans that we get given. And I don't particularly want finance detail because I think it would drown us out completely. But it's really difficult as a committee, I think, sometimes to know really what's going on. As an overview, if you've said you've given an overview plan, fine. I mean, I empathise with some of the comments so far because a few of us have been a bit more long-standing and we've sort of heard it before. But when you talk about high-level strategic, that means money at the end of the day. And when you talk about that substantive budget being covered in February, how long-term or medium-term is that? Because how long does that really cover strategically is what I'm asking. And do those excuse me, services that sit under you understand their budgets, what they've got, and will honour it without holding certain amounts? Because you've got priorities, haven't you? At the end of the day, you've got some serious priorities, which calls for serious money. And a serious amount of money has been wasted. You've covered that already. But obviously, as a committee, I think we need some form of overview in the future.
Well, in terms of
The most security we can have is through the council's medium-term financial plan, which is a 4-year forecast, isn't it? And we come back to that every year in the budget setting, and it's agreed every year. So every year we add another year onto the 4-year medium-term financial plan. The issue with the teams that I've just talked about is the insufficient substantive budget. And so that has meant that Councillor McCarthy and I have had to ask the Children's Services budget to grow, which obviously has meant difficult and will mean difficult conversations for the politicians that make the decisions, because where does that money come from? We've only got one pot, which is growing. So priorities have to be set out, don't they? And consequently, the longest term I can provide is through the medium-term financial plan in terms of security. Your question about do people understand the budgets was something that came up through the baselining, wasn't it, Kerry? Because some people did and some people didn't. And obviously through a new structure, which I'm just creating with a new AD for Thriving Families, there's a great opportunity there actually, because what we've done is looked again at all the budgets and repurposed those budgets according to where those teams are going to sit. And we've got to make sure that we spend the money on the priority things that we're spending the money on. And some of the staff also fed back through the baselining that at times they felt budget was a barrier to them delivering appropriate services for children, which clearly we shouldn't be making. We need to be, well, a statutory duty to be responsible without public money, of course we have, but we can't make professional decisions just based on budget alone. We have to make those decisions with our partners to what is best for children. So that's a role for the partnership, as well as myself, because some of our children have funding needs that need to come from health, they need to come from education, as well as coming from the council. Maybe we've not always had those conversations in the way that we want to have them moving forward. I think, you know, most scrutiny committees would expect an annual look at the budget for children's services to see how the budget is being spent and what impact we're having for our budget and whether that's being well managed. But as part of the Back to Basics, we will be supporting all our budget holders with some refresher training and basic training around this is how we expect you to manage your budget. So when you have your one-to-one, budget is a big part of that conversation that comes up to the conversation with head of service, that comes up to the AD, that comes up to me. So I've got that monthly overview of the budget with Councillor McCarthy today, because sometimes demand does grow and a budget will overspend because we've got a demand-led service. But then we have to think about, well, how do we pull that back in other areas of the directorate? If that's not possible, then it becomes a council problem. So, you know, appreciate what you're saying about the budget, but I think there are opportunities to recognise, first of all, this is the structure that we need, this is within that structure. And that means having, and we've had some conversations already with members of staff that actually need to work a bit differently to have better impact for children. They all want to do the best for children, so that's not been an issue. And that's the beauty of our different structure, really, that we've got somebody now with oversight of those really vulnerable children who weren't receiving services from the trust and they shouldn't, but they're on a part-time timetable or they're electively home educated. So we've got somebody now to have that grip. We need to make sure that those budgets follow the children. And I'm happy to update on the budget at this committee when that's appropriate.
Thanks. I know Councillor McCarthy wants to come in on that question as well. And just on what you were saying about providing more information about the budgets, I think that is important because it's just that, the perception of where's all this money being spent, because it is a big budget in terms of when you don't have that understanding of all of the things that are involved in children's services. And, you know, we know that the range is huge, but to an outsider looking at, well, look at all those millions that they've got and what is it being spent on. So having that overview, as Councillor Clancy has said, is really useful. Councillor McCarthy.
Without encroaching on the next item, I just wanted to say that one of the ways that we get better value is through the partnership working, both within the council and with our external partners like health, the trust, police, voluntary and community organising, the whole range of organisations that work with our children and young people. And when we look at being a child-friendly city, I can go around a cabinet table as a start and tell each one of my colleagues which elements of their work impact on children and young people in the city, not just the obvious ones like housing and transport and the environment, but all the way around. So our children with special educational needs and disabilities need to be able to look at adult services and know what that means for them and their families in the future. As I say, on a good day, I can go right round the table and justify it. We have to keep that level of focus on children and young people right across the council and right across the city in order to get that wrapping around our children and young people and what our commissioner calls corporate love.
Thanks, Councillor McGrath. I see Colin nodding away there. It will come to you very shortly. Last question, because we've got to move on to the next bit of this agenda item. Samugi.
Yeah, I just want to ask about supply teacher. There's an agency teacher. Did you train them or?
For teachers, the agents that they will work with schools, so it's a school will take on the agency.
But when the parent I'm sorry to disturb, when the parent report about the teacher, do you take action or do you investigate?
The school will investigate a complaint against a teacher in the school because that's how it has to happen.
The school complaints procedure is followed. If somebody's not happy that the school has followed the complaints procedure, then they would bring it to my attention, and my directorate would, if it was an academy, we would speak to the regional schools commissioner. If it's a maintained school with our governor services, we would look into why that process wasn't followed and support the school with that.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. Okay, before we move on, we just need to thank everybody for the contributions to that item. We need to note the report and agree that to receive the quarterly update. I take it everybody's happy with that. Yeah, thank you very much. So the next item, another plan, is the Children's Partnership Change for Children 2023 to 28 plan. And Councillor McCarthy and Sue Harrison will be inputting on this item, as will Colin Michelle, who is online. Colin, if you want to come in and I don't see you, you have to shout because the screen is a very long way away from me. But I will try and keep glancing at it to see who wants to come in, but just shout. So do you take it away, Colin?
Well, thank you for inviting me to speak to you today. My role today is an overview of the work that the partnership is doing on the Children and Young People's Plan. I'm going to pause at that point to see if I'm speaking loud enough.
Yeah.
And could I have the previous slide, please? I'd like to say a few things about the previous slide. Thank you. So my role as Strategy and Partnerships Lead, working with the partnership towards its shared ambition. And I'm going to sew in a few things in my talk about some of the comments that we've heard in relation to Birmingham Children's Partnership. I first just want to point out the partners that are at the bottom of this slide, just to remind colleagues that and members that this is a partnership between the council, our health provider colleagues, Birmingham and Solihull Integrated Care System, as well as police commissioners, police providers and the voluntary sector. And I say that because we have had extraordinarily good engagement from all partners during the period that we've been developing and refreshing our Children and Young People's 5-year plan. And that includes the board of the Children's Partnership meeting 4 times between August and November to really engage with this process, which I think has been really positive. And so my role has been around facilitating the 3 tasks that you can see on this slide. So initially around renaming this piece of work from Year of the Child to Change for Children and Young People. And I want to echo there something that both Sue and Kerry have said, that this is about continuous improvement, but also knowing the difference we're making through those 5 years. So working closely with partners to identify the actions and indicators that will help us measure the progress against change that we make across the partnership. Also, at the bottom of this, it says UNICEF Child-Friendly Cities and Communities. We're on the cusp of signing a memorandum of understanding with UNICEF to commit us as a whole place to children's rights. So what that initiative will do is really hold us to account for what we say we'll do over the next year and 5 years. But it's also reflecting not just the children's services system, as Sue has said, but all of our partners that work with children and young people. So within the private sector, with children, young people, families and their communities, which I think is a really extraordinary commitment that we are making as a place. Okay, next slide, please. So these outcomes have at the heart of them our ambition, which is for Birmingham over the next 5 years to become a great place to grow up. Now, we've heard today that over 4,000 children and young people took part in work to share with us what mattered to them about the next 5 years of improvement. We've gone back to children and young people again this year to check in, and you'll see in the paper that we're also planning to go back to them for another 6 weeks just to check what these outcomes mean to them now. We've also aligned these outcomes with the work of the integrated care system, so with our colleagues in health, checked them with our partners that are school leaders and other education setting leaders, and also gone back to various colleagues within children and families and within the wider corporate council. And I was really pleased that we got such a positive response from our extended council leadership team when we shared this framework with them. The outcomes at the heart of this are articulated around it, and I'll read a couple to explain the kinds of things that we'll be measuring as we work together on this plan. So at the top it says we are connected in the voice of children and young people to meaningful opportunities and prepared for adulthood. And this includes not only those opportunities within the education system, but within the wider city in its places and spaces, so access to culture and leisure, for example. The outcome around we are included and confident says that that's at home and in the community as well as in school, because our inclusion strategy commits us to becoming an inclusive city rather than just thinking of inclusion as something that happens in our education settings. And under we are happy and respected, we put that our voices and lived experiences matter, and we'll be committing throughout to involving children and young people, not only in consulting them on this plan, but involving them directly in its delivery. And we've been working hard in the last few months on talking to children and young people about the best way to do that, and we'll continue to be doing that through the life of this plan. And finally, I want to pick out on here, stay safe at home as well as in places outside of home. We're doing really good work in Birmingham through our violence reduction partnership, for example, around tackling harm outside of the home, but we also recognise that that's linked to relationships within homes and schools. So we're working together on this outcome across our whole system rather than separating it out into each of those places. Thank you. I'll have the next slide, please. So partners have worked hard in the last 6 months on the priority areas of work that needed to happen. And this is about joining up our collective strategic action across the resources that we use and the approaches and plans. It's not really about creating lots of new plans, but joining things up. I'm going to start by pointing out the green line in the centre of the collective strategic actions that we're going to work on as priorities. And just mention that, for example, in creating an inclusive city and connecting children and young people to meaningful opportunities, this is the space where that inclusion strategy sits. It's also the space where we tackle structural inequalities, informed by joined up work across the different parts of our system within the council and with partners. Similarly, integrating our offer so that families can connect with help they trust is about that working with our schools, working together to integrate and join up the local offer. And it includes pieces of work like the local directories that we know we need to do work on, so that we know exactly what kinds of community offers and other supports and help are available in each of our 10 localities. Now, above that, it says outcomes, indicators and development. I want to emphasise that we're going to be using both the statutory indicators that we must use, such as reducing school exclusion or tackling indicators of health inequality, but also that we're asking children and young people what progress means to them under each of these outcomes. In the lower line, you'll see in the arrows, voice and co-design with all children and young people. This is really about making sure that the work we do around engaging and getting the voice and views of children and young people helps us to measure progress as it looks from their eyes, as well as the national statutory indicators that we must measure against. Just pointing out the work we've done to make sure that this plan is aligned both with the corporate plan, but also with the 10-year work that the Integrated Care Board are doing across Birmingham and Solihull. The Be Bold outcomes are listed at the top and are fully aligned both with what we're developing in the partnership plan, but also the improvement plans that we've talked about today within the Children and Families Directorate. And we're making sure that this is integrated with the longer vision of the 10-year plan that the Integrated Care Board and wider health system is developing. And that will help us to think smarter, strategically and more practically about how our action plan over the next year and 5 years is delivered. Now, I've mentioned that we changed the name of this programme of work from Change for Children to, from the Year of the Child to Change for Children. And that reflects not only the commitment to continuous improvement, but also what children, young people and families have told us, that actually there are a lot of things about the way we work together that need to change. For example, we've heard today about how our offer needs to be more joined up. Now, some other feedback that we had from the head teacher reference group, which we've also talked about today, was that actually in the year that we deliver this, starting with a launch after Easter in April, we really want to celebrate some of the work that happens every day across our partnership. And so we've proposed to title the campaign that we use to launch this plan 100 Brilliant Days. And in each of those days, our plan is to, first and foremost, as part of our inclusive approach, celebrate the brilliant children and young people that there are in Birmingham, but also celebrate the everyday stuff that's going across all of our 400 plus schools. One of the reasons we've been able to commit to the UNICEF Child Friendly Cities initiative includes the fact that more than 200 of our schools and settings have completed the Rights Respecting Schools Award, achieving bronze, silver or gold. And that's really inspired us to celebrate those everyday achievements in the services that are provided across the partnership, which we really think will highlight the kind of change that we're committing to. Next slide, please. I'm sharing here a timeline of activity. Today's update is an overview of the work we're doing on the plan, and we, in the next 3 months, will be bringing more detailed updates, including the outcomes indicators and action milestones that will happen within this quarter and in the coming year. As we move towards a launch in April, we'll bring back initially to Cabinet and then to full council the detailed draft Birmingham Children and Young People's Plan for 5 years. And in the coming months, we're going to be developing our campaign, which includes a long list of brilliant things to celebrate. I'm really excited that both corporate council departments have been very, very rapid to share with us things that they do with children and young people and that they'll celebrate during this campaign, but also that schools have been really enthusiastic at sharing examples of what they'd like to celebrate during our 100 Brilliant Days. We are on track to complete the draft so that the draft plan comes to Cabinet in March and to Partners Governance during that month so that we can launch the published full version of the plan immediately after Easter. And then we will begin our year celebrating Change for Children, as well as the 5 years of work we'll do together with partners to make sure we deliver those outcomes. That's the end of my update for today. I think Sue or Councillor McCarthy may have some comments about things I've missed out.
Thanks, Colin. Sue, do you want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Colin. I think that was really comprehensive. Really good where we are with our plan.
The only thing I would add is, of course, we're intending on having a group of young people to help us monitor our progress against the plan, aren't we? So the idea is that we'll have young people as champions for the different areas of the plan where they've got particular interest. And myself and the leads across the partnership will meet regularly with the young people to make sure that we're held to account directly by them. That's the only thing I think you missed out, Colin. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this item?
Very briefly.
Councillor Fancy?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, how long's the plan? Because on the main slide with lots of colours, you've got 2023 to 27. And then further down, it could be a typo. It says 2023 to 2028. So financially, are you covered for the 4 years or the 5 years?
So the plan is 5 years and ought to then read 2028. The reason it reads 2027 is that during 2022, the board had got that timescale. And as we come to the board on the 10th of January, we'll approve that actually 5 years takes us to 2023. I think on finances, it's on our agenda plan for the Birmingham Children's Partnership Board to discuss the sustainability of this work in the January board and again in the March board. So I think we'll come back to members with more detail on that.
So it's a 5-year plan from 23 to 28. Yep. Okay. Lovely. Just on what you were saying, Sue, around the voices of young people, I just wanted to ask about how you're going to make sure that it's a wide representation of young people involved in that work, because as we know in the past, quite often, and I do some of this in my real life job, so I know that this happens. I'm not just making it up, but quite often we end up with a group of young people that are willing to work with us as a council and happy to work with us, but then we tend to stay with them rather than try and reach out and ensure that we're talking to young people from across the city, from different backgrounds and facing different challenges. So just that question. And then another question from me, and I know that this is, an overview, but just looking at the Act Together on Child Poverty, and I look forward to receiving more detail on that bit in particular. I think it was about, 6 years, it may be longer because the time runs past us very quickly. I was a member of the Birmingham Child Poverty Commission, and that brought together a range of partners. We did some really good work on that, facing that child poverty challenge, which has only grown over the years rather than decreased, and there are lots of reasons for that. But really, it's just sort of whatever that plan looks like, there has to be, and it's a massively difficult thing to take on board, but there has to be some way of assuring action on child poverty, because it affects so many children and young people in our city, and we know that the figures grow year on year. And we also know, given the circumstances that we currently face, that figure is not going to decrease anytime soon. It's only going to increase. So, that's not really a question, it's just a comment, Colin, but, I'll be really interested to see some more information on the plan and how that is tackled. And it has to be a partnership approach to that, because we know we can't do that on our own. Councillor McCarthy?
I think it is really important, the first point you made about making sure you're not just working with the same group all the time. And I've been impressed by the range of groups right across children, young people and families that are engaged, but that renewal is really important as well. And of course, hearing the quiet voices, and we'll be talking I'm sure, about how we do that. And with the pressure of the cost of living crisis, the feedback from organisations working particularly with children and young people is really important to me, both formally through the existing partnerships and also informally. And I think I've mentioned before that we brought a group of organisations together just to check what the city's work on the cost of living crisis looked like through the lens of organisations working with families. And we picked up some very useful points, not great strategic points, but the little practical points about what goes on elsewhere, about what organisations are doing in some parts of the city that aren't replicated elsewhere, and just trying to join the dots informally as well as through our formal structures. And I intend to keep on doing that.
Thank you, Councillor. Because I'm glad to hear that, because it is really important to me, but I know that it's important to other members here. Sarah, you have a question?
Well, it's just more of an observation, really, and I don't really want to be negative in that, but I am going to be negative. I'm sorry, because I have been on this committee for 7 years. Prior to that, I was head teacher in the city for 11 years, and all of the ambitions that are set out in both this plan and the other plan, of course, we agree with. Why wouldn't we agree with them? But I have sat here in this room for 7 years, looking at plans, looking at interim teams, all the things, Sue, that you've talked about, people that sat here and said, I'm not responsible for the past, I know the past is problematic. But actually, it's really concerning, isn't it? It's really concerning that 7 years, for me, I'm now looking at a plan, like, these problems have been here for the last however many years, and it's like it's all new. These things aren't new, and the ambitions are, of course, things that we want to see happen. Of course, I just feel slightly depressed, really, about it all. The one plan in my time here that has been really successfully monitored by this group has been the Children's Trust, the Children's Trust plan. I found that really detailed, the milestones really detailed. The report shows the progress that's been making all the time, ongoing. Of course, there's still work to be done in that area. There has been real improvements in that area. I just feel really concerned that in my entire career in teaching has been in this city, and we are at this point with a whole load of things which, yes, we should be dealing with, should have dealt with them years ago. And there isn't anything, Sue, that you can say that, you're not responsible for the past, but you are responsible for now. And I just want to see a difference. Because we can't be here in another 5 years with more interim people while we're trying to stabilise the leadership team with the same outcomes that we all want for all our young people in the city.
No, Sarah, that echoes what I said a little while ago, and I think there is frustration. And Sue, I'm not going to come to you to answer, because I think you answered. You've already told us and given us your assurances, and I think it is for this committee. On that, just to make sure that we do fulfil our scrutiny function and, and be that critical friend and hold to account when you report back with the updates, to make sure that the things that we're being told are happening. And, you're confident and Kerry's confident that this is a really good plan. And, the plan that we've just heard about, I'm sure is going to be a brilliant plan. Because they're all brilliant plans, because as Sarah said, they're doing the things, that we need to be seen, and that we want all of our children and young people to have access to the services and everything else. But it's making sure that they are effective and that they're put in place and that the actions are undertaken and that there are real tangible results from them. So those are the bits that we will be pulling you back on, and we will be scrutinising you on, because for us, that's the most important bit, is to make sure that there are tangible results from these plans. And I'm sure you'd agree with that, Sue. Councillor Banner, was it on this point? Because I do I will move on after this, but I'll bring you in. She hasn't spoken yet.
I echo exactly what Sarah has said. Everything that we've seen is exactly what we want to see. But what we have now is what I see in my local area and what I see in schools is it's a lot bigger. We've got the cost of living, we've got schools where I hear parents all the time, they're putting their kids into after school clubs that have become a cost to the school. Kids aren't getting snacks anymore from after school clubs because schools are struggling to provide that extra snack for them. The prices have gone up. But if we're going to tackle what we've said on here, we also need to look at the cost of living and what's actually happening in the schools, how schools are struggling to provide for the children to become healthy and just strive. We have funding that comes into the communities for families who are struggling. But that funding sometimes just gets put onto certain schools, certain areas, and so for example, my ward was missed out on that funding. Those schools didn't deliver that project if they didn't have the money for it. So what we need to look at is all areas, funding and help, all children policy, not just certain areas. My inbox is full of parents contacting me saying, oh, I've got the one family who's got a child who's 19 sitting at home because he was poorly with autism, he missed out on his college place, then he can't get back into school, the funding is closed for him. That's just one example. And in my area, because language is an issue, parents are unaware of what's available. They don't know where.
Thanks.
I would really like that. Look into it, so please.
Thanks, Councillor Bano. Sue, did you want to come back on that comment, or would it be worth Councillor Bano emailing you with some specific?
Always happy to help any specific families. It might be worth referencing, but sometimes we do have to target resource, don't we, to the more deprived wards, because we've got to prioritise. So the 318 schools that had £4.40 for people that worked out about £2,000 each over the Christmas holidays, we're very appreciative of the flexibility that gave them to support some families who don't hit the criteria, perhaps for free school meals or other benefits. And both parents might be in work but really struggling with the cost of living. So we continue to think as creatively as we can to support as many people as we can. But happy to look at any cases.
Yeah, when it comes to the after school clubs, a lot of the parents now are going to do part-time work, even if it's for an adult. What they were doing before the cost of living is providing them with snacks. You know, the children getting a meal at 12 o'clock. The next meal is until 4 o'clock. They're just stopping those snacks, but increase the cost of the after school club.
Councillor Dalton.
One of the things we were able to do through the informal group I was talking about was have the conversation about what is best practice in schools supporting families at the moment. And we talked about perhaps relaxing uniform requirements. We talked about best practice in dealing with school meals where families weren't entitled to free school meals but were struggling to pay, and those kinds of issues. And we can certainly pick up the issues around breakfast clubs and after school clubs as well through that.
If you could please, so what's happening in school, everything is online, it's all on the parent pad. So if the child hasn't got the money in the account, they just refuse the money. I've had a number of parents.
Well, that's exactly what we're trying to get away from, to turn it into a issue of the well-being of the child rather than the debt collection process.
Good. And about making sure that information is available to parents about help and support. And that's a wider council thing, but I know that it's been picked up on the cost of living approaches that the council is implementing. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. I'm going to move on because we're doing really well for time. So we might actually finish on time this week, which will be really good. And we're going to move on to item 8, which is our work programme. So a couple of things to raise on this one. As members will be aware, our last meeting was adjourned for the last item, and we need to reconvene that meeting. An email was sent out and the majority preference has come back for the 25th of January at 1 o'clock. So an email will go out confirming that with you. And that will be to pick up the SENDIAS item that was adjourned at the last meeting. Also, have you got a question on that?
Yeah, just
Use.
special clarification. It's just going to be an open meeting and who's going to be there?
That's a very good question, Councillor Hughes, that I have no answer to at the moment because I haven't got that detail.
I know from the work programme, I think it's June or July, Councillor Laurel has been raising the issue of actually getting SENDIAS there. If there's going to be a discussion about SENDIAS, it seems likely that they should be there. And I know it's on the work plan, I think it said they were going to be here in November.
Yeah.
It's January, they're still not there. I'm just wondering what's happening, Chair.
Yeah, as you know on that one, I have shared Councillor Morell's vigour to get SENDIAS to this meeting, and we will continue to drive that request. Just on the public-private matter, we voted not to go into private session, so I'm assuming that it will be a public meeting. Christian, do you want to?
That's right. Thank you, Chair. In answer to your question, Councillor Hughes, the reason why there's been a delay is because of the issues that had to be dealt with in terms of the redacting of the report, in terms of some areas, very limited areas, as I understand it, and also to make sure that families have been communicated to before the report is public. So the meeting will be a public meeting because it's ultimately the committee's choice. If you wanted to hear that meeting in public or not, you decided as a committee to hold that or to consider that information in public. To be clear, the meeting that will take place is a reconvening of the meeting. So basically, you are just continuing the meeting that you had on the 30th of November. Therefore, the business to be transacted is to conclude that meeting.
Okay. So does that mean that it will be the same format proposed as was proposed for the last meeting that was adjourned?
I think now that we've got a date confirmed, I think we can now look at what information is available to go out in the public domain, and we can confirm the arrangement for that meeting probably at the end of this week, early next week. Okay, so
sorry, Councillor Hughes, and I'm taking on board what you just raised. So I guess that we need to have a conversation around before the information goes out, what would we be expecting at that meeting and who will be expected to be at that meeting.
Yeah, I'd suggest.
So can myself and Councillor Hughes catch up with you, Christian, have that discussion and with anybody else that we think is appropriate? Is that okay, Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, I'm very, obviously this will happen. If the report is going to be redacted, then we won't be able to discuss redacted bits of the report, will we?
But you'll be able to discuss the information that was basically put in the exempt session last time. That information will be made publicly available. There may be sections, I think the legal team and information governance team are looking at the moment, and some issues that might need to be redacted. I haven't been involved in that myself, so I can't say. So I think we were waiting in part for this committee to confirm a time and date for the new meeting. Now that we've got that, we can now look at the logistics of making sure that the meeting can be conducted. In short, it's not a new meeting, it is a continuation of that meeting that would have held on the 30th of November.
And we can raise any issues like that, Councillor Hughes, when we have a meeting with Sue and the legal officer. Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, just because we're talking about the SENDIAS report, I just want to say that I have been asked to be in attendance at a rally on the 10th of January, which is full council day, and that is between 12 and 2. And I really would urge committee members, if they can, just to pop out and talk to parent carers and listen to their concerns. So that's all I want to say. Councillor McCarthy?
Information has gone out to parents and is available on the local offer page about where we are with Sendias. And I have to say it is disappointing that people are stirring this up and causing concern to parents, which really is unfounded.
That is your opinion, Councillor McCarthy, and we take note of that. But I have been approached by parent carers asking for support at that rally. I will certainly go outside and talk to people and listen to them, and I would hope other people would take the opportunity to do that. Just back to the work programme, our next meeting is scheduled for the 12th of February. We have, sorry, no, it's not public, it's 22nd of February. We have got a lot on the agenda of that meeting.
Well,
Councillor Hughes?
you've just made me regret my Adam Chair. I noticed that the Accelerated Progress Plan has been circulated to everybody some weeks ago, and we don't appear to be looking at it. Obviously, that's probably a question for the next meeting there.
It will be, but we have, yeah.
Considering, in the past, I've raised concerns about the plan, but I haven't raised all of my concerns about the plan. I've just clicked highlight. So I don't think we should just allow it to slip past us. It's just a comment.
Would we not be having that at the end? You could ask. Yeah, okay. Right, unless committee members tell me differently, there's no way we would fit it in the next meeting. It's a big agenda. We've got 3 items. If we want to keep all of those items on there, we would probably need to look at extending business at that meeting. Half an hour, 45 minutes. Or we could move the school exclusions and part-time timetables to the April meeting. But given what Councillor Hughes has just said, I would propose that we actually have the APPG. No, that's not right. Is that right? Accelerated Progress. Yeah, on the April meeting. And that we extend the meeting, the February meeting, to keep all of those 3 items on the agenda. And I say that because I think we've been waiting for the exclusions and part-time timetables information to come back. It's important because it will inform the inquiry work. So it's important that we hear that. And also, given some of the things that we've asked for previously and how it ties in with other things, I think it's very important that we do hear that next meeting. So is everybody happy to go with an extension at the next meeting, keep those 3 items on the agenda and bring the Accelerated Progress Plan on the agenda at the April meeting alongside the update report from the Children's Trust? Yeah. Fantastic. So just on that, the date and time of the next meeting, as I just said, well, we will have the reconvene meeting on the 25th, and then it's my mum's birthday, sorry mum. And our next meeting is on the 22nd of February at 10 o'clock. Everybody happy with that? Yes? Any requests for calling or calls for actions, petitions from any councillors here? No? Any other urgent business? No? And then finally, do I have your authority in an urgent situation between meetings that I jointly with the relevant chief officer has authority to act on behalf of the committee? Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for coming today, and Happy New Year, and see you on the 25th. Thank you.